Thank you everybody to be there, and thank you to the Lexa team for the invitation. I am super happy to be there to present what I tried to construct in these last years. Some parts, depending you who you are in the public and your background in some technical aspect, some part of the talk, if they are not clear, we can come back on them at the end of the presentation without any issue. Like this, I can clarify if some elements were too technical or something like this. Um, let's talk a bit about projectile. Human have been. Wait 1 second. I remove just this from the screen. Yes. Human have been hunter for most of our past, but we still lack understanding on how they hunted because of the near lack of organic preservation at Paleolithic site. Hunting activities likely had a significant place in Paleolithic hunter-gatherer society, not only for their nutritional role, but also due to the number associated craft activities. These include the production of the point, the projectile shaft, and the weapon itself, but also the butchering of the game and so on. Hunting was therefore a time-consuming activity that likely represents a considerable portion of the daily life of this population. To reconstruct this subsistence strategy, we do not have access to a lot of material, but we have a large quantity of lithic implements, and some of them once served as weapon element. Identifying that a lithic element was used as a projectile point is not an easy task, as in most of cases only the tip have been preserved, and we have only them to reflect on the complete weapon. Dealing exclusively with flint material presents a complex challenge, as form does not necessarily dictate function. For instance, these three tools that you can see on the screen can be used interchangeably for cleaning skin, butchering carcasses, serving as projectile point, or even working with vegetal materials. Fortunately, flint is a brittle material and it tends to fracture during use. This breakage records the use-related stress that caused the tool fracture and their abandonment by Paleolithic population. Several decades of research have demonstrated that projectile point break easily during use, and their identification depends on recognizing a combination of macroscopic and microscopic damage in addition to other forms of microscopic wear traces. Their presence on site are frequent, and they can help us to track prehistoric weaponry. However, detecting the tip of a weapon on an archaeological site does not necessarily enable us to comprehend how past society used this weapon. Identifying past weapon systems have proved to be a difficult task and has been a methodological challenge from several years. The most frequent argument used currently to produce insight about past weapons is based on the size of the point. It is driven by the idea presented by Susan Hugh in 1998 that a point should be larger than its shaft to be efficient to cause death by blood loss. In consequence, small points are generally associated to small shaft and large ones to large shaft. This approach has been formalized under the term tip cross-sectional area and tip cross-sectional perimeter, and is actually the most common way to produce hypotheses about the weapon system associated with a lithic point. As previously discussed, form does not equal function. Similarly, size does not directly correspond to a specific weapon system. During an extensive experimental program conducted at the Tracer Lab, we observed that a large variety in size of point can be mounted on shafts of various dimensions, used with a range of propulsion mode, and still achieve sufficient penetration to inflict a lethal wound. This highlights that a point does not need to be wider than its shaft to be effective. This finding in turn challenged the relevance of TCSA-TCSP measurement as indicator of the ideal shaft size for each point, and by extension the reliability in forming hypotheses about the propulsion mode associated with the measured point. Like we saw, lithic points generally break during use. The scientific community has long suspected that impact fracture on stone points hold significant potential for identifying past weapons. However, establishing a direct link between specific fracture and the weapon that caused them remains a challenging task. This challenge stems from the high number of parameters that intervene in the case of an impact motion and that may affect fracture formation on stone point. To address this, we initiate a research program aimed at understanding the mechanism behind impact fracture formation and exploring how this insight can help in the identification of paleolithic weaponry. Resolving this question necessitates to respond to two prerequisite questions. How do different projectiles fly and how a lithic point will break upon impact? Understanding the interaction of impact phenomenon in fracture pattern formation necessitates a decomposition of the problem and a simultaneous work on each of the different aspects. In order to reach this goal, we decide to construct our referential framework based on the combination of different disciplines. Fracture mechanics in brittle solid and ballistic serve to shed light on the phenomenon we seek, and an experimental approach will serve us to test them, and all this information will be integrated to our user analysis in order to resolve this complex question. Uh, I have a... No, it's okay. To begin this work, it was necessary to provide ourselves with powerful description tools. We have therefore proposed a revision version of the previous fracture terminology. The main advantage of this version is its level of precision, which allow a better registration of the fracture characteristic, which lead to more freedom to operate analysis. In fracture mechanics, researchers have identified in the last 30 years the two main parameters that control the fracturing process of a brittle solid. It is the amount of stress and the direction of its application. These two parameters determine the initiation, the propagation, and the termination of fracture. This research has been carried in the context of stone knapping, but an impact is a similar phenomenon, and these notions are transferable. Jovita and colleagues have already demonstrated in 2014 the significance of these two parameters in an impact fracture phenomenon, and that serve as base for our work. The question now is how to identify the stress of each weapon and to see if they are unique and reproducible. If it's the case, this could lead to the method we seek. In order to answer this question, we decide to take the ballistic study of paleolithic weaponry one step further. Thanks to a collaborative work with the ballistician from the Royal Military School in Belgium, we were able to identify the kinetic energy level produced by each weapon and the angle of incidence, which together characterize the reaction impact stress. Based on this experimental program, we were able to conclude that the reaction impact stress produced by each weapon is distinct from the others and reproducible. The stress received by the armature during impact is generated by the way the projectile will meet its target. The direction of the stress application is caused by the angle of incidence of the projectile. The angle of incidence is the angle between the tangent of the trajectory of the center of the mass of the projectile and the axis of this point. It is the angle that you can see here and in the video, just there. The amount of stress received by the armature depends on the amount of kinetic energy of the projectile directed toward the body of the armature. Both parameters call what we call the reactional impact stress. It is the purple line here. The reaction impact stress experienced by the armature upon impact vary depending on the weapon system. The stress generated by a bow exhibits a relatively low level of kinetic energy, around 30 joule, but it is almost entirely directed toward the body of the lithic armature in a compressive phenomenon, meaning that nearly all the stress is dissipated within the lithic armature itself. In contrast, compressive stress is less pronounced for the spear thrower, and it even transitions to a bending phenomenon in the case of throwing spear, where the stress is mainly dissipated now outside the body of the armature. For the thrusting spear, the reaction impact stress is less oriented toward bending compared to the throwing spear, but it presents a massive kinetic energy. This first result allowed us to consider a working hypothesis. The dominant factor that guide the fracture phenomenon are the reaction impact stress received by the point, the morphology of the fissure material, its nature, and its hafting arrangement. The question that remains is what are their independent effects and how they interact. To explore the influence of raw material, we used a bench test designed to apply pressure to a piece at a specific angle. The setup was configured to simulate the the reactional impact stress of a throwing spear. Here you can see the complete setup used for the experiment. The testing machine was calibrated to apply force until the point fracture, and the pressure was applied by a bone compressor. And everything was filmed by a Nova S12 camera. Like I said, we used a we use a Frontron Nova S12 camera to capture the development of fracture at 30,000 frames by second. The results are clearly visible in the video that you have in front of you. Under an identical pressure condition, different raw material does not fracture in the same way. The speed of crack propagation varies, the extent of propagation differ, and certain category of fracture occur more frequently with specific material. To explore the weight of other parameters in the formation of fracture pattern, we produced a large actualist experiment of 360 points, presenting 6-point morphology, 4 modes of propulsion, and 3 options of hafting. This was done in order to test the effect of point morphology, mode of propulsion, and hafting strength on impact damage creation, frequencies, and morphology. Regarding the fracture pattern, the morphology of the point and the mode of propulsion influence the nature of impact fracture. The strength of the hafting system seems to does not necessarily play a role in this. Each point morphology either promotes or limits the occurrence of certain fracture category. For example, backed points that you have here tend to favor the formation of bending break and secondary damage. As mentioned earlier, each mode of propulsion generates specific mechanical stress upon impact. This stress interacts with the point morphology, either promoting or limiting the occurrence of certain fracture type. To take the example of bucket point back, which naturally tend to produce secondary damage, this effect is further amplified when these points are shot with a bow, as this propulsion mode tend to increase the occurrence of such fracture. And conversely, the number of secondary damage decrease when these points are used with a spear thrower, which tend to limit their formation. The formation of impact fracture and their morphology cannot be understood through a single parameter. Instead, it coming from the interaction of multiple factors. In our initial experiment, we test 3 parameters, of which only 2, point morphology and mode of propulsion, prove to be significant. Since then, further experiments have revealed that the orientation of projectile within its shaft also play a crucial role. Based on our current understanding, the parameters that influence fracture formation morphology are, in order of importance, the armature morphology, the lithic raw material, the hafting system, and the weapon delivery system, the last. Therefore, when attempting to identify the type of weapon associated with a lithic point in an archaeological assemblage, we must address this question in this specific order. For some of these parameters, we can copy as close as possible the variation seen in archaeological material identified as projectile element. But the last two remain the unknown factor that we need to resolve. And this is specifically the question that we aim to address by our experimental program. An important consideration is that not all archaeological assemblages are suitable for this type of approach. To reconstruct the weapon system associated with archaeological piece, we need assemblage that contain a sufficient number of fractures, at least 30, on contemporary piece identified as projectile element. We generally need between 10 and 15 projectiles. This piece should be made in a similar raw material, and if the faunal spectrum is known, it is better as this simplifies the selection of appropriate target for the experiment. The absence of any of these elements will reduce the precision of the analogy we can draw between the fracture signal of the experimental and archaeological material. After this bit on methodology, let's pass to a practical case where we apply this method. This is a study that we conduct in collaboration with my colleague Nora Tepal and Verle Rots, the head of the Tracer Lab. Mézières-Canal is a site located in the south of Belgium. It contains a large number of pointed artifacts dating around 30,000 CalBP. A total of 34,000 lithic artifacts, along with organic pieces and their manufacturing debris, faunal remains, burn bones, and burn stone, indicative of earth, were discovered from the site. The site has been interpreted as having a single main early upper Paleolithic occupation layer, with limited vertical displacement of the find. Regarding the question of projectile armature, Mézières contain a significant number of tank points. It is wait for the pointer. Yes, it is this point, tank points, and Mézières point, this piece, which have been the primary focus of our analysis. We identify 32 pieces as projectile elements at Mézières Canal. These pieces often display the three main category of fracture we described earlier. Additionally, in some cases, microscopic analysis conducted by Nora revealed traces associated with the friction of small removal created during impact on the surface of the piece. It is the bright line that you have here and here. The tank point make up the largest group with 17 pieces, followed by the Mézières point with 11 pieces. Several tank points identified as projectile elements exhibit a very specific type of fracture on their tank. It is this fracture here. This is a bending fracture initiated from one edge of the tank toward the opposite edge. It begins here and it finishes here, suggesting that the point was locked in a strong retention system, preventing the dissipation of impact by lateral movement. Due to the limited number of fractures observed on the Mézières point, we decide to focus our analysis on the tank point. Like we saw earlier, the first step in the conduct of an experimental program dedicated to projectile analysis is the reproduction of the morphological variation of the piece identified as projectile element in the archaeological assemblage. You have an illustration here of the morphological variation. These pieces are made out of large blades that are retouched with several generations of direct retouch to shape the point out of the blank. To produce a reliable replica of archaeological tank point, the selection of blanks for reproduction is crucial. Indeed, some of the archaeological points were made on blades that were minimally modified by retouching. It is therefore essential to replicate the blade production system to ensure that the experimental blanks are similar to the archaeological one. A detailed technological analysis of the material is thus a critical prerequisite for reproducing this piece. At Mézières, this analysis was conducted by Olivier Touzet, who documented that the points were produced on large blades obtained through bipolar debitage from the widest surface of the core. But it is not because we know how it was done that we are able to nab them ourselves. In consequence, the first step of our experimental program was to identify the gesture needed to reproduce the morphology of the point that were identified as projectile element and learn them. We successfully reconstruct their chain operatoire and obtain point with the same morphology and very similar waste product. The morphology of the artifact and the location of the fracture provide a valuable insight to create hypotheses about the hafting system. Tank points are created from relatively curved blade, and the curve profile of this point pose alignment issue when they are hafted via a dorsal or a ventral contact. It's what you have here. Such misalignment can lead to issue with penetration upon impact. Specifically, this configuration increases the chance of the point fracturing upon contact with the skin. These issues are absent when considering a bilateral contact. It's what you have here. Notably, it is to note that the edge of the tank are relatively regular, which facilitate the use of such hafting. Based on this observation, combined with the evidence from regular bending fracture initiated from one edge of the tank that suggests a strong retention system in contact with the lateral edge of the tank, the bilateral contact is our hypothesis for the hafting system of the tank point. It's time to test first our hafting hypothesis. For this, we use a first sample of 30 pieces in our mini flint, since the archaeological source, the Aubourg flint, is almost exhausted in Belgium. We test the three binding techniques and 4 modes of propulsion for this step. The shooting protocol used 3 distance: contact for thrusting spear, 5 meter for throwing spear, and this is a choice made in order to assure a maximum of precision of the shot, and we use 10 meter for the spear thrower and the bow. During this initial experimental phase, the hafting method proved to be effective, allowing the point to penetrate the target without any issue. Additionally, we managed to reproduce some of the traces observed on the archaeological piece, but we were not able to match the proportion observed in the archaeological assemblage. We doesn't have a match between none of the weapon and Messier Canal. Notably, because we observe no secondary scar on the experimental piece at the difference of the archaeological material. We have none of this fracture in the experimental material. On the other hand, we did produce bending fracture initiated from the edge of the tank. These fractures were generated using the most robust hafting system. It is glue covered with sinew and a covering of glue again, and with the use of a spear thrower. Consequently, for the next experimental phase, we restrict ourselves to a single hafting system, the strongest one, but keep the 4 classical propulsion modes to further investigate the possible link between the propulsion system and this particular bending fracture of the tank. For this phase, dedicated to determining the mode of propulsion, we modify the raw material, selecting a finer flint that closely resembles to the one used at Messier, as we suspect that the absence of secondary scar in the experimental material was due to the nature of the flint previously employed. For the remaining parameters, the experimental protocol remains unchanged. This phase allowed us to produce no secondary damage and to better replicate the archaeological fracture pattern. We also successfully reproduced in several instances the fracture initiated from one edge of the tank. These fractures were consistently produced during a spear thrower shot. As you may recall from the video work. As you may recall from the beginning of this presentation, the spear thrower is characterized by generating a larger bending stress upon impact. This phenomenon, combined with an hafting method that gripped the side of the tank, explain the occurrence of this very specific fracture on the tank. You can see here in the video that when you shoot, the spear thrower hook goes up, and at the end of the movement it's going down, and this going up and going down will generate an important flex of the dart that generate this bending component. The spear thrower therefore appears to be the most likely propulsion method used in association with tank point. However, we identified a bias in our experiment. Unintentionally, we kept the wider tank for the thrown spear and the thrusting spear, as these were easier to haft given the diameter of the shaft. For arrow and dart, we used the narrower tanks. We observe both in the experimental point and in the archaeological corpus that no point with a tank with greater than 12 mm exhibited this specific fracture. It thus seems that the 12 mm measurement represents a threshold for the creation of this fracture. Although tanks narrower than 12 mm were mounted on throwing and thrusting spear, they were relatively few. It is therefore necessary to conduct an additional experimental phase. For this next phase, we exclude the bow from the experimental protocol, as the archaeological pieces have tank width ranging from 7 to 14 mm, and we were consistently unable to haft a tongue wider than 10 mm into an arrow shaft. On top of the rest, the fracture signal produced by the arrow was very dissimilar to the one produced at the site. After adapting the experimental protocol once again, we again successfully produced fracture initiate from one edge of the tank and again exclusively associated with spear thrower shot. The fracture pattern generated by the spear thrower mimic almost perfectly the archaeological pattern. You can see here the difference of percentage of the different fracture are really close. In conclusion, we can assert that the spear thrower was most likely the weapon used to shoot the tank point at Mézières Canal around 31,000 years ago. The fracture pattern-based approach I just presented to you is time-consuming and generally requires several experimental steps, but it allows for the identification of weapon delivery system. If you are interested yourself in applying this method to your own archaeological assemblage, a detailed blueprint of the method is available in a paper published a bit more than 1 year in Scientific Report. And if you have any question on that, if you want to apply this, I am more than happy to respond. Thank you a lot to all for your attention.